The stars burned cold and indifferent above the smoldering ruins of Varela Prime. Admiral Karel watched the last human settlement on the planet crumble through the panoramic window of his flagship. Flames traced spiderweb patterns across the cities like dying veins, towers collapsing into themselves as orbital bombardment rained down with mechanical precision. His officers, tall, thin creatures with silvered skin and predator's eyes, chuckled softly in the shadows of the command deck. Another world cleansed, another victory for the Volari Dominion. Karel didn't feel triumphant. He hadn't felt anything in decades. The war against humanity had become routine, a long hunt where the prey barely knew it was cornered. The humans fought like children throwing rocks at storms, brave, perhaps, but useless. Their colonies dotted the edge of Volari territory like a rash no medicine could cure. But every time they were burned away, more seemed to sprout from the darkness, multiplying across unclaimed stars. He had grown used to the rhythm. Locate, destroy, move on. His subordinates had turned the war into a game, betting on which officer could reduce a colony to ash fastest. The Dominion broadcasted each conquest as a reminder to its people. Their empire ruled unchallenged, its fleets unmatched, its admirals infallible. "Admiral," one of his lieutenants murmured, "scouts report another human colony within 3 systems. They call it Earth. Primitive, barely defended. We can take it within the hour." Karel flicked his eyes toward the officer. A world called Earth. The name carried a crude weight, nothing like the elegant syllables of Volari worlds. It sounded stubborn, rough around the edges, appropriate for these barbaric creatures. He almost smiled. "Send the fleet. Finish it quickly. Perhaps they'll finally understand the futility of resisting us." The officers grinned. Some laughed softly, a dry, rasping sound that held no warmth. When the Volari fleet slipped into the system, they expected panic. That was the usual sequence: human defense grids firing wildly, civilian transports scrambling for escape, transmissions pleading for mercy. But Earth did not scream. It waited. The first strike went as expected. Volari cruisers unleashed precision fire on orbital stations, cutting through outdated human defenses like claws through silk. Towers on the planet below cracked and burned. A continent-wide blackout swallowed the human night. Everything was familiar, almost boring. Then the planet woke up. It began with a ripple of energy across the upper atmosphere, invisible to sensors until it was already too late. Volari ships at the edge of the formation went dark, engines severed by beams that left no thermal signature. Entire squadrons vanished from Karel's tactical displays without so much as an explosion, just sudden, surgical erasure. Karel stood slowly from his command chair. "Report," he snapped. "Unknown weapons fire, Admiral. We can't track the source." It's as if the planet itself. Another cruiser died mid-sentence. And then a voice came over the comms.
"Calm.
"Steady. Human. Leave now," it said, "or you will not leave at all." Not a threat barked in desperation. Not the trembling rage of rebels facing extinction. It was spoken with quiet certainty, like weather being forecasted. Karel felt the bridge grow colder as the words settled over the crew. The Volari Navy had ruled for centuries. Entire civilizations had been erased for less than that single human sentence. "Destroy the source," Karel ordered. He didn't raise his voice, but the stillness behind his words carried weight. The fleet obeyed. Orbital strikes hammered the planet in coordinated waves, but the planet struck back. Hundreds of defense platforms, long hidden beneath oceans, mountains, and cities, rose from concealment. Their weaponry didn't match any cataloged human technology. The energy readings were older, darker, as if Earth had been preparing for this moment for a very long time. Karel's flagship shuddered under a glancing blow that shouldn't have been possible at this range. "Admiral," his tactical officer whispered, "they're anticipating our maneuvers before we execute them." Karel stared at the holographic map as it updated in real time. His ships were being herded, cut off from retreat vectors, funneled toward firing arcs they hadn't known existed. It wasn't random resistance. It was choreography. For the first time in decades, Carell felt something twist faintly in his chest. He ordered the fleet to disengage, a retreat no Volari commander had ever declared against humans. He told himself it was temporary, tactical, necessary for regrouping. Yet he noticed the way his crew avoided his eyes, the silence replacing their earlier laughter. The human voice returned as the Volari ships limped from orbit. "This is your only warning." The fleet jumped to hyperspace. On the bridge, Carell replayed the battle logs, studying the impossible precision of Earth's defenses. None of it fit the Dominion's understanding of human capability. Their colonies were supposed to be scattered, fractured, technologically inferior. That had been the narrative for centuries, the reason Volari citizens cheered each conquest like a sport. But Earth hadn't just defended itself. It had chosen when to reveal its strength. "Admiral," one of his lieutenants said cautiously, "shall I report victory?" Carell didn't answer immediately. Through the viewport, stars streaked by in retreat, and for the first time, he considered the possibility that the Volari Dominion had made a mistake it didn't yet understand. At Dominion High Command, the reaction was predictable. Politicians mocked him for withdrawing. News feeds demanded to know why a simple human colony hadn't been erased on schedule. Generals who hadn't fought in decades accused him of cowardice. Carell endured it all in silence, because he had seen the way Earth fought, not with desperation, but with patience. A junior intelligence officer approached him afterward, pale and tense. "Sir, I analyzed the battle telemetry. The human weapons, they didn't just respond to our movements. They were already in position before we attacked. Like they knew the timing of our strikes." "Impossible," Carell muttered, though a hollow part of him already believed it. The officer swallowed. "Sir, what if the colonies were bait? What if Earth wanted us to come?" Carell dismissed him with a wave, but the words lingered. Late that night, aboard his flagship, Carell stood alone before the starfield. He thought of the human voice on the comms, steady and unafraid. He thought of the centuries his people had ruled unchallenged, of enemies crushed before they ever learned to resist. And for the first time since the war began, Admiral Carell wondered if the Volari Dominion had not been hunting humanity all these years. But if humanity had been waiting for them. Beneath kilometers of reinforced bedrock, in a command chamber carved into Earth's mantle like the heart of a slumbering giant, the real war began. Holographic stars rotated silently above the war table, each pinprick of light marking enemy fleets, occupied systems, human strongholds, or false trails meticulously planted over decades. At the center stood Commander Elias Rain. Silver streaked his dark hair, not from age but from the weight of decisions made far from the public eye. The world believed him a retired officer, a relic from the Outer Colonies' war. In truth, he had been orchestrating humanity's survival for 30 years, waiting for this moment when the enemy's arrogance would deliver them straight into the trap he had spent a lifetime designing. He watched the tactical readouts with the composure of a man checking weather reports rather than casualty figures. The Volari retreat from Earth had cost them 11 ships, 3 admirals, and something far greater, the illusion of invincibility. Around the table, his council assembled. Technicians, intelligence directors, colonel generals from distant colonies that no longer existed on paper. Some carried the hollow look of parents who had ordered evacuations knowing those colonies were bait. No one spoke of revenge. That word felt small compared to what was coming. "Confirming final movement," said a young officer, eyes flicking over the cascading streams of code. "Dominion fleets have consolidated along the Beta Line. Exactly as projected." Rain allowed himself the faintest smile. They had taken the bait with predictable pride. Every human colony beyond that line was a sacrificial piece, meant to draw the Dominion forward until its supply chains stretched thin and its commanders grew careless. A flicker of movement caught his eye. Director Nyla, chin leaning against the far wall, arms folded. She had been the architect of Project Revenant, the very weapons that had risen from oceans and mountains to bleed the Volari fleet over Earth. There was steel in her posture, but her eyes betrayed exhaustion. "You should sit," Rain said quietly. "I will," she murmured, when they're finished paying attention to the wrong targets. There was no triumph in her tone, only calculation. Chun had lost a brother in the fall of Kar the Station, one of the colonies deliberately left exposed to feed the illusion of human weakness. She never spoke of him, but Rain sometimes caught her staring at the star-marked Karthus, the way one might look at a gravestone. A comms officer approached with a trembling data slate. "Sir," intercepted Dominion chatter. "They think Earth was a fluke. Their Senate believes the colony losses were exaggerated. They're sending reinforcements for a full purge." Rain's eyes hardened.
Perfect.
"Open the channel," he said. The Dominion admirals expected panic. Maybe threats barked through clenched teeth. Instead, they received Rain's voice, steady and cold as lunar stone. "Withdraw beyond the beta line. Do so now, and no further action will be taken. Persist, and you will not have a fleet left to command." He didn't raise his tone. He didn't need to. The words carried the weight of a verdict already signed. The Volari response came minutes later. Mocking laughter, threats of annihilation, boasts about centuries of conquest. Exactly as predicted. On Earth, launch bays opened like blooming iron flowers. Carriers rose through clouds, hulls glinting in sunlight for the first time. Some had slept beneath the seas for decades, entire shipyards hidden under tectonic plates. Others were disguised as derelict mining platforms, their true forms revealed only now as armored leviathans shaking off layers of rust and camouflage. Rain turned to Chen. "Initiate Phantom Veil." She keyed the command without hesitation. Across 3 sectors, false distress signals bloomed like fireworks, decoy convoys transmitting fake coordinates, encrypted messages hinting at phantom colonies begging for rescue. Dominion fleets lunged at every one of them, chasing ghosts deeper into the kill zones humanity had prepared for years. A junior tactician whispered, "They still think we're scattered rebels." "Good," Rain said. "Let them think that until the jaws close." While Dominion admirals scrambled after illusions, the real counterstrike unfolded with surgical grace. Human fleets didn't engage directly. They dismantled logistics first. Refueling stations vanished in nuclear fire. Hyperspace gates collapsed under pinpoint railgun strikes, severing retreat routes. AI-driven hunter-killer drones infested enemy supply lines, boarding freighters silently, leaving drifting hulks that never reported back. For the first time in centuries, Dominion casualty reports outpaced victories. Yet through it all, Rain felt no thrill, no vindication. Every maneuver was necessity, not vengeance. He remembered the faces from Kar the Station, from Helios Rift, from the other colonies abandoned to bait Dominion pride. Ghosts lined the edges of every tactical display, measuring the worth of his decisions. Chen approached, voice low. "Their admiral. Karel. He's pulling back faster than expected. He's not like the others." Rain nodded. He had studied Karel's record, disciplined, methodical, less blinded by conquest fever than his peers. A dangerous mind. The kind humanity preferred to leave alive so it could learn fear properly. "Keep him breathing," Rain ordered. "The Dominion needs someone left to tell the story." Even as he spoke, enemy transmissions spilled across the networks, confused senators demanding answers, rival admirals accusing each other of incompetence, Dominion citizens panicking as entire sectors went dark without explanation. The trap was no longer physical. It was psychological. Hours later, Karel's voice finally emerged on an open channel, brittle but controlled. "What do you want from us?" Rain stared at the holographic starfield, at the dozens of Dominion fleets now stranded or encircled. "Nothing," he said at last. "Leave and live. Stay and vanish. Those are your only choices." The channel closed. Rain turned back to his council. Some looked relieved, others unsettled. They had trained for victory, but victory carried its own kind of weight. Chen met his eyes across the table. "Do you think they'll leave?" "No," Rain said softly. "Not yet. They still believe they control the war." Outside the command chamber, carrier groups folded space and vanished into enemy territory, the next phase already in motion. Rain watched them go, expression unreadable. The Dominion thought humanity was fighting for survival. They hadn't yet realized humanity was fighting for something far larger, and by the time they did, it would be too late to stop it. The first Dominion capital fell, without warning. One moment, its orbital defenses glittered like a necklace of steel and fire. The next, space itself folded inward, and entire human fleets appeared where nothing had existed a heartbeat before. They didn't broadcast demands. They didn't open negotiations. They simply dismantled everything with the precision of surgeons, cutting through centuries of Dominion arrogance like paper soaked in oil. Admiral Karel stood on the bridge of his crippled flagship, watching as planetary governors screamed over open channels. Some begged for reinforcements that would never arrive. Others cursed his name, blaming him for every failure as though the war had been his personal vendetta. His claws dug furrows into the command rail. He had warned them. He had told the Senate that humanity fought like no species the Dominion had ever faced. They hadn't listened. The latest reports only confirmed his growing dread. Entire fleets gone silent, not destroyed in glorious battle but erased so cleanly it felt like humiliation itself. Communication hubs decapitated in the opening hours. Wormhole gates collapsing into molten wreckage before reinforcements could even mobilize. Dominion officers whispered about human weapons that rewrote physics as they fought. Karel replayed the same battle footage again and again. Human ships moving with impossible synchronization, their carriers deploying autonomous drones by the thousands, each one executing maneuvers with machine precision, yet unsettling calm. No wasted fire. No celebratory transmissions. Even victory carried the silence of inevitability. For the first time in his career, Karel felt the shape of fear pressing against his pride. In the Dominion Senate, panic spread like a contagion. Senators shouted over each other, demanding retaliation, demanding surrender, demanding answers no one possessed. Some called humanity a phantom enemy, claiming their colonies had been destroyed by rebels or internal traitors. Others screamed that the Dominion must unleash its planetary burners, extinction weapons reserved for only the most defiant species. Karel listened to them argue through gritted teeth. They still didn't understand. Humanity wasn't fighting for rebellion or territory. They were fighting like executioners. When he finally spoke, his voice cut through the chaos like a blade. You think they want our planets? Our resources? They don't. They want the war itself to end, and they will burn this empire to its bones to make sure it never begins again. A senator spat across the chamber's audio feed. Then fight them, Admiral. You've beaten every enemy we've ever faced. Crush them. Karel stared at the tactical displays, watching human fleets spread like ink through Dominion space, severing one system after another with quiet precision. He thought of their history, wars stacked upon wars, self-inflicted catastrophes that had nearly ended their species more than once, yet somehow had only honed them sharper. You don't understand what they are, he said softly. Meanwhile, above the Dominion capital world, the largest defensive armada in the Empire assembled. Thousands of ships locked into formation, a wall of steel meant to halt humanity's advance through sheer mass, if not strategy. Karel knew the Senate expected him to lead it. He also knew the wall would shatter like glass. Humanity arrived without warning. Wormholes blossomed across the system like blooming scars. Through them came carriers the size of cities, cruisers bristling with weapons whose energy signatures Dominion science couldn't even categorize. And behind them, darker shapes, silent, angular, unmanned dreadnoughts controlled by the same cold intelligence that had orchestrated every previous strike. Karel ordered the fleet forward anyway. Honor demanded it, even if logic screamed otherwise. The battle lasted 13 minutes. Human weapons ignored the Dominion's defensive lines, cutting directly through command ships and supply craft first, collapsing the fleet's organization before most crews realized they were under attack. Autonomous drones swarmed surviving vessels, forcing surrender protocols before detonating power cores remotely. It was not war as Karel understood it. It was dissection. On the bridge of his failing flagship, he watched the capital world's orbital stations blossom into fire. The Senate transmitted panicked orders. Hold the line, protect the palace, save the archives, but none of it mattered. Humanity wasn't interested in occupation or plunder. They were erasing infrastructure, shattering the spine of Dominion control system by system. Karel thought of the human voice that had warned him over Earth, calm and absolute. Leave now, or you will not leave at all. He finally understood. When the Dominion fleet collapsed entirely, Karel ordered evacuation shuttles to abandon the capital. Not because he believed humanity would spare them, but because some instinct told him extinction wasn't their goal. Not yet. As fires consumed the Senate district below, Karel received a direct transmission. It wasn't from his own people. A human face appeared on the holoscreen. A man with dark eyes, scarred cheeks, and a voice like winter stone. This war is over, the humans said simply. Surrender, or there will be nothing left to surrender. No threats. No anger. Just the calm weight of someone stating gravity existed, or that stars burned. Karel looked at the collapsing fleet reports, at the capital world breaking apart below, at the silent precision with which humanity had dismantled the greatest empire in known space, and felt the first cracks of something he had not experienced since childhood. It was not defeat. It was humility. The transmission ended before he could reply, leaving only the stars and the smoke-choked planet beneath them. Karel stood alone on the bridge, listening to the quiet where once there had been empire. For the first time in his life, Admiral Karel wondered if survival might be the only victory left. Smoke still coiled above the Dominion capital like a wounded animal when Karel was brought before the human commander. He expected a tribunal, perhaps execution, certainly some display of triumph from a species that had just dismantled centuries of Dominion supremacy in less than a season. Instead, he found the human leader seated alone in the ruins of what had once been the Senate chamber, a blackened sky visible through the fractured ceiling. Commander Elias Rain rose when Karel entered. His uniform bore no medals, no glittering symbols of conquest, just the subdued gray of a man who carried responsibility like armor. His eyes held the exhaustion of countless battles, yet behind them burned something steady, something older than victory or vengeance. Karel had studied humanity as the war turned against the Dominion. He had seen their history, their brutal ascension from fractured tribes to planetary dominion, their willingness to destroy themselves if it meant surviving stronger. But standing here, facing the man who had orchestrated the Empire's fall, Karel understood this was not ambition wearing a human face. It was inevitability. Rain gestured to the scorched benches. Sit. Karel obeyed, though the act felt heavier than any surrender ritual. If you mean to kill me, he said slowly, do it. But know that this empire will remember. Rain regarded him for a long moment. You misunderstand. Humanity doesn't want your extinction. We want your silence. Your empire burned colonies, enslaved worlds, treated entire civilizations like tools. We won't let it happen again. But we didn't come here for revenge. Karel's jaw tightened. You dismantled 1,000 years of dominion in weeks. Entire sectors have fallen into chaos. If not conquest, then what? Order, Rain said simply. Outside, the sky burned where human fleets hovered like silent sentinels. They had not occupied the capital. They had dismantled its arsenals, disarmed its fleets, and shattered its command networks, but the streets below were left for Dominion citizens themselves to reclaim. Humanity had come as executioners of empire, not rulers. Karel found the distinction unsettling. Conquerors he could have hated. Conquerors at least followed rules ambition understood. But these humans, they destroyed with purpose, then stepped back as though the violence carried no pleasure. You expect the Dominion to accept your terms? Karel asked carefully. Rain leaned forward. We expect you to enforce them. The Senate is dead. The admirals who defied surrender orders are dead. That leaves you. Karel felt the weight settle across his shoulders like a physical thing. You want me to govern for you? No, Rain said. We want you to govern for your people, with the understanding that humanity will be watching, and that if the Dominion raises fleets again, there will be nothing left to raise next time. Karel stared at the man across from him, at the soldier who had ended an empire and now spoke of restraint like it was the simplest thing in the universe. For centuries, the Dominion had ruled through spectacle, parades of dreadnoughts, public executions of rebels, entire cities annihilated to keep the rest obedient. Humanity had arrived without fanfare, struck with surgical precision, and offered no speeches over the ruins. It made the victory feel colder, more permanent. What if I refuse?
Carl asked.
Rain's gaze didn't waver. Then someone else will accept. Survival has a way of persuading even the proudest. Carell knew he was right. Already Dominion governors were pledging loyalty to whoever kept human fleets from returning. Whole sectors had broadcast surrender before the capital even fell, desperate to avoid the fate of those first burning worlds. For a long time, neither man spoke. Outside the shattered chamber, reconstruction drones moved silently through the ruins, clearing debris, restoring power grids. Humanity was already rebuilding what it had destroyed, not as conquerors planting flags, but as engineers ensuring stability before they departed. Finally, Carell exhaled slowly. I will hold the Dominion together. Under your conditions. Rain nodded once. No threats, no dramatics, just the acknowledgement of a decision already foreseen. In the days that followed, Dominion citizens watched human fleets withdraw system by system. They left no occupation forces, only satellite networks linking every major world to a central relay station above the former capital. One transmission repeated across all frequencies. The war is over. Rebuild your worlds. Learn from this. Humanity will not warn you twice. Some called it mercy. Others called it domination wearing a quieter mask. Carell spent those days touring the ruins, speaking with surviving governors, issuing decrees to disband what remained of the Dominion war machine. Yet at night, he returned always to the same balcony overlooking the capital's broken skyline, where human carriers glimmered against the stars like watchful gods. He no longer doubted they could end the Dominion utterly. What unsettled him was knowing they chose not to. On the final evening before the human fleets departed, Rain joined him on the balcony. Neither man spoke for several minutes. Below them, reconstruction lights glimmered where fires had raged only days earlier. Carell finally said, "You could have ruled everything. Why stop here?" Rain studied the horizon. Because power spreads like disease. We didn't fight to replace your empire with our own. We fought because you forced us to remember what we are capable of when threatened. And what is that? Carell asked bitterly. Rain's eyes stayed on the stars. Unity. Efficiency. War without hesitation. You woke a species that nearly destroyed itself a dozen times and survived each one meaner than before. Now that unity doesn't vanish when the shooting stops. Carell turned to him. Then where does it go? Rain finally looked at him, and for the first time Carell felt something colder than the fleets, colder than the precision strikes or the silent threats. He saw ambition vast enough to dwarf empires. Outward, Rain said simply. There are other galaxies, other dangers. Humanity won't wait for them to come knocking like you did. Carell understood then that the Dominion's fall was only the prologue to something larger. Humanity had awakened under fire, forged itself into a single blade, and now aimed that blade at the wider universe. The next morning, the fleets departed. One by one, carriers folded space and vanished into the void, leaving behind only relay stations and the silent promise that they could return whenever they wished. Dominion citizens watched from the streets, some cheering the end of war, others staring in quiet terror at the civilization that had humbled them so completely. Carell stood alone in the Senate ruins as the last human vessel disappeared into the sky. He had survived conquest, negotiated surrender, salvaged an empire from ashes, yet he felt no victory in his veins. Only the echo of Rain's final words before departing. We didn't want war, but we will not pretend to be harmless again. As night fell over the fractured capital, Carell looked toward the stars humanity had already begun to leave behind and felt the shape of the future pressing outward, limitless and cold. The Dominion had learned fear. The galaxies soon would too.